It became a challenge when we started talking about RFID, though, because of the way we built. It's primarily concrete and metal, and those are two factors that Robert informed me later that was going to be a problem. If we would have stayed at our old facility, it was all wood and decrepit, and everything would work a lot better. But we are primarily cattle sales, but we're not a cattle auction. We sell by private treaty, which is really a private negotiation. It's a private auction. That presented a problem just because of a consolidation point. Where are the cattle going to flow at one point throughout the facility? We solved that fairly well by doing it in the first part of the facility, and we'll take you on a little tour through the facility to explain that. But the primary problem for us was the high flow. Robert approached me early on asking if we would do a single lane reader, and I resisted. It just, I thought it would disrupt the flow of our facility, and obviously the speed, and I guess that's primarily it, being able to flow the animals through, and also equipment to get through these particular ways. So my challenge to him was I have to have something that's at least 7 feet wide. We have 10-foot wide alleys, and as we're going to show you today, there's a reader that we feel is reading at this width of 7 feet. This first video here is just of our docks. Our facility works in a circular motion. We use the same docks for loading and unloading our animals. It's just a matter that when we unload, we'll see shortly, the reader is coming right off of our docks. As I mentioned, this reader is set up to be 7 foot wide at this point, but it is adjustable. We were concerned whether or not we were going to get solid reads at this distance, and so we decided to make it adjustable to test it and see if it would read at different rates. When they initially installed this reader, they did narrow it down. It has the ability to narrow down to as little as 4 feet. They were getting accurate reads that way, but we've also been testing at this 7 foot, and we're very pleased with the results we're getting. This is the facility where we're selling the animals. We're the old commission style sales process whereby we have 2 brokers that are out there sorting and selling these cattle. Again, the reason I bring this up is just because of the consolidation point. Throughout the facility, we were looking for a common point where all the cattle are going to go through, whereas here we're segregating them in different ways. The next challenge then was we thought about the scales, and actually that was my first idea, was put it up by the scales, and at that time I was thinking it was going to be an asset for me. Initially when I got involved in this 5 or 6 years ago and they introduced this, you go through 2 thoughts. First of all, what are they going to make me do, and what's it going to cost? Then the next thing is, okay, what's in it for me? And I started thinking about, okay, I've got this RFID tag, instant database. I'll know my customers. It's going to flow into my accounting system. Oh, this is going to be a beautiful thing. I'll be able to fire everyone. Doesn't work that way. And I guess that's one of the good things about maybe low-frequency RFID. It is a passive tag. And I think what people need to understand is that this passive tag is no different than an electronic back tag. All it is a number. And unless you have a database that corresponds to that number, it means nothing. And I think that's where some people get a little caught up. They talk about beef producers being a little skeptical about it and everything else. But they all think that, I can come along and read that tag. I'm going to know everything about their operation. And, the IRS is going to come in, the feds and everything else. And, they're a bit cynical. Again, this is going back to our scaling operation. We use 2 scales for scaling our cattle. Initially, when we were talking about single lane readers and being 18 inches and everything else, I happened to go to convention and I saw there's another reader out of Australia by the name of Boontech, and it was an overhead reader. And I was on Robert probably for a year or 2 about it. I'm going, this is the answer, Robert. It's going to be overhead. We're close to the head. I got uniform heights on my cattle because that's all I'm really dedicating these scales to. Other than maybe some feeder cattle that are a little shorter, this is going to work for me. Well, Robert did look into it for me, and unfortunately the Boone ticket wasn't quite as good as their advertisement, and so we never did go in that direction. The other thing there would have been the fact that we probably would have had to do it on 2 scales. We're sorting to each scale on a regular basis, and just use 1 scale would have slowed down the process. So going back to it, I'll go back to where we do come off the docks. What you're seeing here is just before the docks. We're coming off of the docks and we're going right through the reader right here. Again, it's the one consolidation point that everything can get read. And I guess the purpose here is not so much as going back to what can it do for me, but what can I do to satisfy this program. And by having this reader here, it does 2 things for me. It reads all the animals, and I don't have to worry about it. On a daily basis, I don't have to concern myself with anything that's with this reader. On a nightly basis, Robert takes and he can dial into this system. He can see what was read. Now, on a percentage basis, that's pretty tough to know what kind of reads we're getting because of the fact that it is early in implementation. We've got dairy herds that have the tags. I think we're probably getting maybe 100 to 200 reads a week out of this particular system. Is that a lot? Well, it's hard to tell. We probably do 2,000 to 3,000 head a week, but as far as the amount of tags that are in, we think that's pretty close. Will this system replace what we're doing now? That's a ways off, and there's technologies that I have to look into and discover. We are still very attached to the visual ID system. We need back tags to individually identify animals just for the sales process in this, because we'll use that visual ID to not only track the animal back to our accounting system, but also to individually sell those animals. We're using a system out of Canada. It was originally called Genesis. It is now called ViewTrack. They do have some software that we're investigating at this point, but not satisfied at this rate, and especially with the adoption rate out there, that it's going to be of any use to us at this point. But again, at this point, it's not what's in it for me. I guess it goes back to what's in it for me is why I think this is important is because it's an insurance policy. I've seen over the years when government has tried to trace back individuals in regards to maybe TB, or else it might be for drugs or anything else, and the process is slow and cumbersome. The other thing that happens with back tags is we'll have duplicate tags, and I just think that this is a more efficient process to be able to trace the animal back to its source and hopefully maintain the marketability. We've seen restrictions placed on both Michigan and Minnesota before us, and it's affected us in some respects. We used to have some people come in from Minnesota and buy feeder cattle from us. And right now, with the restrictions of movement of those cattle through the states, it's hurt our markets. And I'd hate to see that happen in Wisconsin. So I'd like to be able to identify a problem early and isolate it. Again, we are seeing RFID tags, but primarily it's dairy producers. Talk to cattle producers or fed cattle producers about it. It's slow on the uptake, and it's the same issues that have been raised here today. What's in it for me? What can I do to make my system better? I guess the WLIC at this point, as I discussed before, we thought it was important to get the infrastructure, but we also thought it was important to get tags out there. And so that's been our emphasis at this point, is get adopters out there. Hopefully we get people that are using it. And I really believe that a producer given a chance, they're pretty ingenious. They always come up with different ways that they can use something like this, but we got to get it in their hands first. Some of the programs that may be used is age source verification. In the state of Wisconsin, with the heavy component of dairy, we also have a lot of Holstein fed cattle in our state. If we're going to do any kind of age source verification, quite often you get a pen of Holstein steers, it could come from 10 different dairies. And that's, unless we have something like this, it would simplify the process, let me put it that way. Animal health records, that's another thing. Anytime that we're bringing anything in from out of state, we're having to have the vet come in and inspect these animals. RFID would be an aid into having electronic vet certificates. Again, back to the restricted movement. If I had to move these animals single file, it'd slow up my process. Right now, this alley is 84 inches wide, which means about 42 inches. We feel it's working properly. We've done some tests on it. There were some communication issues initially that we had to resolve. The equipment, the reader itself is a lease. It's out of Australia. Some of the back-end equipment is from Allflex. There were some communication issues that had to be resolved. Our initial test we ran through, we were getting an 80 to 90% read rate. When we did it multiple times, we found that there was probably an issue with these communication and the tags. Reliability of the equipment, yet to be known. We've been in 4 months. We haven't seen the harsh winter weather. The people that are going to install it refuse to come to our facility in the winter and install. I still got them anyways, though. They came to install over a weekend. They showed up on a Friday morning, and they were all there that weekend. I think 2 out of 3 days that they were there, it rained. So we still have a way to get them. Yeah, it was outside. I think we'll see later that this is outside. And the rain was fairly similar to what I'm seeing going on outside today. So, again, you know, what has this done to my facility? Virtually nothing. I mean, the labor hasn't increased. I haven't had to really do anything to assist in the reading of these tags. The construction impact, we'll see that I was fortunate enough to have an area here that was long enough. It's approximately 14 feet, the span of this reader. Again, it's 84 inches wide. As we'll see later, and maybe I'll go right here, there's 4 panels on each side. These panels are spaced about a foot apart. I think, you know, the gentleman earlier was talking about a 20-foot span and how that aid. And I think that's an asset here in the fact that we have multiple panels and that we're doing it at a distance. I think quite often cattle do not tend to walk in a straight line. You know, they tend to bob and weave and everything else. So you take at a maximum distance of 42 inches and probably somewhere within that 14 feet, they're probably getting anywhere closer. Exactly what, I don't know. But we are finding that they are reading. The other challenge, as I mentioned earlier, was the fact that it's steel and concrete. That's something that you have to be careful of with RFID and the readers. So far, it hasn't been an issue to my understanding. What has been an issue, and what's interesting, is when they initially installed this reader, I was using metal halide lighting in my facility. Recently, I've been convinced that there's an advantage to doing fluorescent lighting. But what I wasn't aware of is the initial noise readings that they did with the metal halides was good, but the fluorescent became a bit of a problem. We think we can solve that just by dedicating a circuit. It so happens that the readers are plugged into the same circuit as some of the fluorescent lighting. Again, this is outside so that it's not direct, and we think if we isolate the circuit that we can solve that. Again, a picture of the readers as they stand. As you can see that there's metal close by on the outside. I wouldn't allow them to tear it out in case I didn't like the reader. And the other problem we have here is that we're storing cattle close to these readers. And we had to directionalize the readers so that the fact that all these cattle that are standing in back of these readers were not constantly being read when they're in this, and only the cattle are coming through the alley. As you can see, probably it's a little tough. It is down below, and we built this on a slide. So again, if we did find that it wasn't reading at this rate, we have the ability to adjust this reader and bring it in or out according to the needs. Here's a picture of some cattle coming through. As I discussed, they're probably 2 to 3 wide in this. In the 4 months, I don't think it's had much impact on cattle movement. No more than, as you can see before this, sometimes we're coming out of a dark facility into the light. Cattle can be a little resistant to something like that. We're fortunate enough that we're primarily Holstein and they don't tend to buck as much. Some of the natives, they'll have a tendency to be a little more skittish to something like this, but even the natives have really, we haven't found any true problem with going through that.